Why do we have irregular verbs? Little kids have the right idea. At a certain point in their language development, they make mistakes that, when you think about it, are perfectly reasonable. In fact, a lot more reasonable than the messy, irregular system they're supposed to be acquiring. But eventually, they grow up and fall into line with the rest of us and learn that some verbs don't fit the expected pattern. Why are there verbs that don't fit the expected pattern? Why do we even have irregular verbs? If you take a look at the history of English, most of the irregular verbs we have used to be regular, which is to say the rule for making the past tense used to be different. The rule used to be to change the vowel. So in Old English, a word like ride became rode, and other words like it followed the same pattern. There were actually a few different vowel change rules, but based on the form of the root word, you could tell which rule to use for the past tense form. Some of the products of these rules survived into modern English, but many of them didn't survive. So what happened? Well, there was one other past tense rule in Old English for words like louvain, to love, which changed the ending of the word to a d sound. That rule is the origin of the past tense suffix we know today. For some reason, in the Middle English period starting around 1100 AD, it spread and eventually forced out the other patterns. But some verbs resisted the spread of this pattern, and those became the irregular verbs we know today. They became irregular because the world changed around them, while they refused to change. Why did certain verbs resist the change? If you take a look at the irregular verbs in English, they happen to be some of the ones we use the most. Because we use them so frequently, their forms were reinforced over and over again, giving them strength to withstand the changes around them. Less frequent words didn't get their forms reinforced enough to resist. Even today, while some words like dream, kneel, and leap show some wavering between regular and irregular patterns, the really frequently used ones like sleep, leave, and feel resist regularization. And the really, really frequently used verbs like to be, they tend to be the most irregular of all, and they echo back to even older patterns and ancient historical changes. Of course, this is a simplified account of a complicated story. Sometimes old past tense forms can survive, even if they aren't frequent at all, but because they belong to a particularly notable domain of use. And the pressure to change isn't all one way, from irregular to regular. Had and made were once haved and maked. Sometimes, when a regular verb is very frequently used, it can lose some sounds, making it become irregular. Why keep pronouncing those extra consonants if you really don't need them? Had and made are good enough. Likewise, why put that extra syllable in hitted, cutted, shutted, when they already end in a sound that's close enough to the past tense suffix? Every act of language use involves a mix of enforcing old habits, applying rules to new situations, and economizing effort. The proportion of the mix is subject to varying priorities and is always changing. It may not make for a very orderly product, but it does the job we need it to do.